So hi, welcome. I guess I don't have a monitor, huh? Okay, that's fine. They asked me to give a presentation titled Startup Positioning for Global Growth, but I realized that I don't really know what that means, to be honest. So we're going to talk kind of about that, but we're really going to talk about how not to be a startup, or Silicon Hell, how San Francisco broke startups. Okay, so I'm from San Francisco, so here's me. Okay, third most famous American in Prague. Don't ask me how I know that, and don't ask me who the other two are. I was born in Silicon Valley, kind of. Yeah, I was born at Stanford Hospital. I've been for 10 years in Prague. I work with Startup Yard Accelerator. We're the oldest seed accelerator in Central Europe. I've invested in 40 plus startups. There's an angel investor or with Startup Yard. I've been there with them for 5 years. And I'm obligated to tell you that we have an open call right now. So if you've got a high-tech idea involving AI, or security, or blockchain, or anything cool like that, then come and talk to me after. Okay, so what am I trying to solve today in my 25 minutes? I have 47 slides, by the way, so I have to move fast. Startups, a simple game complicated by fools such as myself. All right? Silicon Valley is rotting your brains, right? How many people want to go to Silicon Valley? Anyone? No, don't do it. Don't do it. Stay here. Or come to Prague, actually, but stay here. Okay, so people from Silicon Valley can do anything. That's what Elon Musk says, when he's not tweeting about making robots. Yeah, he doesn't live in Silicon Valley, never lived in Silicon Valley, and he's from South Africa, and he does his business in LA. So it's quite interesting that he has that opinion. I don't know why. So this is San Francisco when I was born in 1985. The median home price was about $100,000, $120,000. There were about 8,000 homeless at that time. I remember walking around on the streets, and when we talk about homeless, I think Europeans don't really understand what that really looks like, right? So not homeless in the sense of drinking and kind of having not a great home situation. I mean actually living on the streets dressed in garbage bags, homeless, right? This is what we're talking about in San Francisco. This is San Francisco today. Median home price is now $1.2 million. And the homeless population is about 8,000. It's about exactly the same as it was when I was born. So this is making the world a better place, right? San Francisco. Okay? That's what's going on, right? So this is the reason that I left. It's the reason that I stay away. It's the reason that I tell you not to go there. It's because of this. Right? Survivorship bias. Anyone familiar with survivorship bias? Anyone? What is survivorship bias? No? Okay. So essentially survivorship bias is the idea that, for example, you take London in the Blitz. If the Germans bomb you one night and you survive, right, then you feel a bit lucky. The second night you also survive, well, now you feel sort of invincible, right? By the third, fourth, fifth time, you don't even wake up when the bombs are dropping, right? That's survivorship bias. I made it, so I'm going to make it, right? So the truth is, in Silicon Valley, the failure rate for startups is actually higher than it is in most European capitals. The reason there are so many big financial successes is because there are so many people there. It has nothing to do with any special thing in the water, believe me. Although the water is good, it's not that. So how do ecosystems actually happen, right? This is something a lot of younger engineers and entrepreneurs in Europe never really understand about San Francisco. It didn't just happen, right? It wasn't like Steve Jobs showed up and invented startups, and then, it was a magical experience. No. They evolve the same way they do in nature, right? So why did Silicon Valley become a center for technology innovation? It was because it was already a center for publishing, right? So the American publishing industry, especially in education, was already centered in San Francisco, right? And that was going back decades before computers were even in the equation. So when the personal computer revolution happened, right, some of the first customers for the new technology were publishers, right? Publishing hardware, publishing software. This was what the original Macintosh was all about. It was actually for publishers and editors. And in fact, my mother, who was a managing editor for a very large textbook company, was one of the first people to get an Apple computer directly from the company. So maybe you see California like this, right? It's business friendly, it's entrepreneurial, it's fast moving, cutting edge, highly educated, right? And this is what I hear everywhere when I go and travel around in Europe. We need to replicate the culture of Silicon Valley, right? Yeah, we have to have our own Silicon. What do they call it in Vilnius? Like do you have like a Silicon Alley or a Silicon Boulevard? What is it? Okay, there you go. So same thing. Yeah, here's the reality in California, okay? Highest income taxes in America, highest sales taxes in America, number 23 in internet access, number 26 in healthcare affordability, 33 in public safety, that sounds nice, 33 in infrastructure, number 37 in mental health, so we're all crazy, number 42 in education, we're all stupid too, number 42 in economic opportunity, we're all poor, number 43 in energy, living in the dark, and number 49 in affordability, right, living on the streets, and number 50 in budget transparency. So all that plus corruption, right? So this is great. This is a wonderful environment for startups, right? And what's always fascinating to me is, for example, I see one of our Polish VCs over here talking to me yesterday about government investment in startups. California doesn't do this, right? So we're trying to replicate California culture by creating grant programs for startups, right? When these are the conditions that San Francisco startups are in. So I don't really understand how we're going to build an ecosystem that way, right? Doesn't really make sense. Does this work? No? Where am I supposed to point this? It doesn't work. Next slide. Was that me? That was you. Okay. So how innovative, right? This is San Francisco today. So I choose not to live in an environment like this. So disruption, right? You've been told disrupt so many times that the word has lost all meaning, right? TechCrunch disrupt. What's the disruption, right? VCs ask you this question. What's the disruption? I don't ask this question because I think it's a stupid question. All right? Disruption is just solving fake problems, right? It's like Uber is disruption, right? Oh, taxis suck, so we're going to make taxis that suck even more. That sounds great, right? So disruption actually means capture, right? It means capturing a market with an unfair advantage, right? In an unfair way, using technology. So new consumer disruptions feed the growth machine, right? I don't have time to get into this, but I'll just show it to you. Okay, so this is the way, for example, that e-commerce actually works. This is all the money that fuels Silicon Valley, right? And you talk about why the valley is so rich, it's because just of a couple of companies. First, Amazon is in Seattle, but Facebook and Google, right? It's all Facebook and Google, which is all advertising, right? So these are the greatest minds in the world, right, with PhDs in rocket science. And how are they spending their energy? They're trying to convince you to buy a new car, right? Trying to convince you to buy that little new tech gadget, right? That's what's going on, okay? So there's no disintermediation from e-commerce, right? It's not replacing, it's not disrupting the old way of doing business, right? It's even more intermediation, right? This is what it actually looks like. Today you have, consumers and retail. Retail sells data to big data firms, which sell the data to even bigger or smaller data firms, sell the data to somebody else, who sell the data to somebody else. What do you think, when you go on an e-commerce website, how many companies do you think are touching your data at any given time? What do you think? 10? 20? 30? 60? About 60, right? About 60 on average. So that's what's going on with disintermediation, right? It seems like there's a lot of middlemen in this disintermediated online market, right? So disruption isn't sustainable, right? Let's look at a few examples. Okay, it always has to go further, right? So sustainable businesses aren't disruptive. Let's talk about interruption, okay? Because who actually likes disruption? Like if you go into a hospital, do you want it to be disrupted by technology? I'd be like, you know, I do heart surgery. I really need some disruption in this environment. No, not really, right? So I don't want you to focus on disrupting systems that actually function, right? This is a key problem for a lot of young, thirsty entrepreneurs. They think, well, okay, you have this big opportunity, right? And you got to disrupt the market so that you can get your piece of it. That's just weird, okay? Don't do that. So focus on interrupting systems that don't function, right? What doesn't work? Let's talk about that, right? And finally find value that people will pay for. This is the problem for me. I know this is supposed to be a section about ICOs and fintech. We invest in blockchain companies, we invest in fintech, but one of the things that we don't do is invest in things that people are not willing to pay for, right? That are just speculative, right? Focus on creating value for your customers, right? And remain as close to your customer in the value chain as you can. Don't be a startup helping startups help startups, which help other startups, right? And don't, by the way, sorry, don't build parking apps. Anyone building parking apps? Don't do that. Please don't do that. Okay, so here's some of the companies that I'm going to tell you about that we've invested in very quickly. I won't go through everything. But when we first got started, this is one of the first companies we invested in, Dami Idlo. So imagine it's 2011, and in Prague, at least, you can't even order a pizza on the phone, right? Because they have no idea what that even is, right? And they can't be bothered to deliver. So the market doesn't really understand the need, right? That there's a bunch of stoned college students, and they really need pizza. So we invested in a startup that created a network for delivering pizza, right? It creates great value for restaurants because they get all new customers who can't be bothered to come into the store, right? It creates jobs for the drivers, and it gets pizza to college students, which is also good. Giraffa. This is a search company which is competing with Google in Kosovo, Albania, and Macedonia. It's the biggest and fastest growing tech startup in the Balkan region. I was the first angel investor, so I always like to talk about these guys. So, you know, they woke up one day, the founder, Mergem Sahani, and realized that Google doesn't do anything for the Albanian language, right? So they were not focused on the market because the market was too poor. But a few things about Albania was kind of interesting. Let's see, 70% of the population is under the age of 35. It's the youngest population in Europe. It's the most mobile population in Europe, so they got 4G before they got 3G. Most people don't have home internet. They all use their phones. So these guys decided to create a Google plus an Amazon plus, you know, a LinkedIn, all for the Albanian language. So, you know, they realized because the big players like Google weren't having enough of an impact in the local ecosystem, that they could step in and they could create a backbone for the internet economy. And that's exactly what they did. So this is not disrupting. This is not going in and saying, we're gonna fuck everything up that you guys are doing and we're gonna do it this way. This is creating something, creating value for people that have an urgent need. Finally, I want to talk about one more company, Neuron Soundware. We invested in this company about 2 years ago. They're now working with Airbus, with Skoda, Deutsche Bahn. So these guys came to us, it was quite interesting. These guys came to us with the idea that they were going to help streaming services do compression for music, right? So this was an enabling service. It was finding an efficiency in huge companies. The only problem is, of course, Spotify and Google and Apple, they already do this. Compression is, you know, something that you can hire 100 engineers and they could figure out how to compress something. These guys were using neural networks. Pretty soon they realized that There is an urgent need in 3D printer manufacturing, in airplanes and heavy machinery, to listen using simple microphones. They're not that simple, they're very expensive, but actually they're just microphones, and figure out whether machines are going to break and possibly kill people. So that was an urgent need, right? There was an urgent safety need. These guys found it just by listening, right? So they didn't jump into the market and try to tell everybody how this technology is supposed to work. They went on a listening tour and they talked to big manufacturers to find out, what was actually causing the biggest problems, what was actually causing accidents. Okay, so this is my thesis for today. Don't make the world a better place. Okay, don't do that. That's not your job, right? As entrepreneurs, it's bullshit when you hear this, right? How many people have said this? Make the world a better place. No, that's wrong. Okay, you're not making the world a better place. You're trying to make money, right? And that's fine, right? But identify an urgent need and solve that need, right? Let's make the world a better place by picking up our trash, and not kicking small dogs and children, and being a good neighbor. That's fine, right? That'll make the world a better place. Pay your taxes, stuff like this. Focus on creating value for people, okay? So let's talk about Uber really quickly, because I mentioned them before. I love this topic, because suddenly nobody wants to talk about Uber, right? You go to any presentation, especially corporate, about innovation, and it's like all of a sudden nobody's talking about Uber, right? They just erase those slides, and here's why, okay? What are the innovations that Uber has done? Tech innovation, anybody? Tech innovation, mapping? No, not so much, the maps suck. UX, UI, no. Payments? No, not really. Transportation? It's just cars, right? Not really, okay? The real innovations from Uber: shifting capital risk to their users, right? Getting their drivers to buy cars instead of investing in them themselves. Convincing drivers to subsidize growth through debt, right? That means taking out auto leases, taking out loans. Uber even co-signed loans for people who couldn't afford the cars they were buying, and then lowered their actual income from the app. Mass behavior modification, right? Manipulating people into driving when they don't want to, or driving longer than they plan to. And rapid regulatory capture. This is the big one, right? Going into markets and moving so quickly and disrupting so fast that local regulators had no choice but to deal with them instead of banning them. And negative revenues as assets, right? The idea that you have so much carry and so much revenue that your company is worth $70 billion. Do you know how much Uber lost in cash last year? Anyone? Losses, net losses, almost $5 billion, which is incredible. I mean, it's incredible. There's never been anything like this in business. $5 billion in losses. And now let's talk about Airbnb. Also from San Francisco, also disruptive startup, went through Y Combinator, which is, by the way, an accelerator. So let's learn how an accelerator can help you create real value. Right? I hate Holiday Inn, by the way. It sucks. Tech innovations for Airbnb? Nah, not really, right? The real innovations: monetizing real assets, right? Homes appreciate in value, cars don't. Increasing market competition, right? Giving some competition to hotels, which suck, right? Providing consumer choice, right? More places to stay, more types of accommodation. Driving competition in quality experience, right? And interrupting a race to the bottom in pricing. So what was the previous sort of paradigm, right? Build more hotel rooms, cheaper hotel rooms, drive the prices to the bottom. Today, you don't see the hotel industry, they're not dying, they're still making money, but they no longer have to race to the bottom because there's plenty of Airbnbs that are small, single bedrooms. So it provides much more diversity on the market, choices for customers, right? That's an urgent need that existed, right? That's why that company was created. So if you look at the founding stories for Uber and Airbnb, they're kind of similar, right? You've got Travis Kalanick in London saying, "Oh, I can't get a cab, right? So I'm going to create an app and then lose $5 billion." No, Airbnb, oh, we're at a tech conference and we have no place to sleep, right? And yet, the way that they focused on creating value is entirely different, right? Uber focused on creating value for themselves and for their end users, right? Airbnb focused on creating value for the people who were going to use the platform to make money, right? The people who were going to actually rent out their homes. So what do these two stories sort of tell us about? They're two different industries, right? Transportation, accommodation, taxis and hotels. In my opinion, it's that startups can amplify cultures, but they can't change them, right? The hotel industry is about hospitality, professionalism, right? Tradition. The taxi industry was originally organized by the mafia, right? It's corrupt. It's based on fear, and it's not really a functional industry, right? If you look at New York, for example, they've had the medallion system for 80 years. But the reason they have it is because when they didn't have it, right, it wasn't that taxis weren't regulated, it's just that they were regulated by the mob, right? Which meant all the money coming out of it was criminal. So, this was a market that never worked without regulation. Now you come in with technology and you think, well, the technology will solve the whole thing that happens, when you don't have regulation, and then you find out that it does exactly the same thing. So you can embrace it or ignore it, right? I think you can embrace something, or you can embrace a problem and try to interrupt it, or you can ignore the problem and try to disrupt it, right? You can be an Airbnb or you can be an Uber. Which one of those made money last year, right? So what makes a startup work, really? For me, it's focusing on big needs, right? Working with your base conditions, focusing on what you know, and your local economy, right? Your local strengths. It's not going to Silicon Valley and trying to disrupt something that you don't even understand, right? It's focusing on something you do understand. Focusing in areas where there are few competitors, right? Areas that are growing, and then have little public interest, right? Don't focus on opportunities. I'll talk about that a bit later. Focus on conditions around you that are changing, right? What's changing about the economy in Lithuania, for example, right? What are the demographic changes? What are the economic changes? What are the cultural changes, right? What parts of life are the most dynamic, right? That's the most important question you should be asking. And finally, it's not about money, it's about need, right? I don't care how big a market is. I care about how much, as an investor, I care about how much your customers need you, right? Because you're gonna make money if they need you, right? So here's how you can position yourself as an innovator, all right? Understand your base conditions and work with them, right? Be the best that you can be in your own region, in your own market. Be ahead of public policy, okay? Don't take money from the government, right? Because then you're part of a system that's trying to preserve itself. You don't need to do that. Don't take grants, don't take tax breaks. Press your local advantages, right? Do things that outsiders can't do. And if you can do those, right, and you can prove it out, then you can export it, but not before, right? Don't say, well, I have this great technology idea, but it's not going to work in Lithuania because we're too small, so I need to go to Silicon Valley. But that's backwards, right? And hopefully you've learned that lesson already from companies like Skype, right? Because every time they tried to sell Skype to Microsoft or whoever, right, the company that bought it screwed it up. So for some reason, only the Estonians know how to make Skype work. I have no idea why, right? Press your local advantages. Identify urgent needs, okay? Don't identify efficiencies. How am I going to save $1? How am I going to turn a process that costs $1 into a process that costs 99 cents, right? This is not exciting. This is not a growth business, right? Saving people money is not about growth. So focus on growth. Don't focus on opportunity, right? One of the worst things that I see when startups, like a lot of you guys, pitch, and you talk about the market size and the opportunity for you, as if this is realistic at all, right? First of all, I hope you're in a market that's going to grow, right? Not one that's already big. Secondly, I don't want you to think about getting 5% of that market, right? Why not 6%? Why not 4%? I want to know how your customers, how that market is going to need you so much that it can't dismiss you, right? So don't pitch me an opportunity, right? Talk to me about an urgent need. I'll give you a great example of this. A company that I never thought we would invest in, a company like this. But we met some guys who were going through a program at Vodafone Foundation in Czech Republic. And these guys, it's a social impact startup. And it's a marketplace, which are two things that we have always said that we don't do. So we decided to invest in them anyway. The guys are deaf, right? Anybody have some deaf friends? Friends who are deaf? Very few of you. It's very interesting. Very few of you. So there are 70 million deaf people in the world. And what we found out, something we didn't know, was that deaf people hate writing and reading. Did you know this? They don't like to read and write because it's not their native language, right? Their native language is sign. So when you actually look at the way deaf people use the internet, it's almost like, you know, they're existing in the 1980s. You know, they're using digital tools the way that people did before all this other stuff existed, before social media, before YouTube, right? Because they have no way. For example, if a deaf person goes on Google, right, and they want to search for something like content in sign language, well, there's a problem there because the videos that exist don't have tags because the person who created the video didn't tag it, right? Probably because, first of all, they might not know the language of that person, but secondly, they don't know how to tag it, right? They wouldn't bother. So instead, deaf people create video content and they share it with each other on social media, but there's no way to organize it. And there's no way to label it, right? You even see Facebook groups of deaf people, worldwide Facebook groups, that say in their rules, you can't use words in your posts. You can only post video, right? Which makes it really impossible for people to create a body of content that's searchable. So these guys understood that. They come from Prague, which is home of Seznam, one of the biggest search companies in Europe. So they really understood what the problem was. And they had a solution. We're going to create a content platform where deaf people can create content with geographic basis, so that, you know, if you go to I don't know, an historical monument or a restaurant or whatever, somebody in the deaf community can create sign language content by video that helps you understand what's on the menu, for example, what's the history of this location. So this is something that is urgently needed. And that none of us understand, right? And all the old tricks, all the old technology doesn't make sense at all, right? So this is nothing to do with disrupting the deaf community, right? This is about solving an urgent need that they have, that they all recognize but don't know how to solve. And I can tell you, even working, even in being an investor for deaf founders, for deaf entrepreneurs, is incredibly difficult. It's very hard to communicate with them because even when you're speaking face to face with a translator, right? It's going into a language that doesn't have a lot of the same concepts that we do, right? They don't understand the internet the way that we do. They don't understand data the way that we do. They have a completely different worldview shaped by their language. So this is the kind of thing that we really love to do, right? This is the kind of thing that you guys should be thinking about. You know, what's my real urgent need that I understand that nobody else has seen, right? And how can I interrupt the current system and make it better, right? So this is how we drive innovation, right? We embrace social history and culture, right? We focus on knowledge that people have, inherent knowledge, right? We stay privately funded. We don't take government money, so no one can tell us you know, what to do, what our direction should be, what kind of companies we should focus on. We focus mainly on hard data science, AI, security, stuff like this. Stuff that's difficult to replicate, stuff that requires quite a bit of knowledge and skill. We don't focus on opportunity, right? We don't focus on market size. You can't tell me, oh, you know, we're going to get into social media because it's a gazillion-dollar market. Well, it doesn't matter, right? All that matters is need. And we target sustainable growth, right? We want our companies to become actually profitable, not just vehicles for more and more investment, more and more losses, right? And here's what I'd like you to remember today, because I've only had 25 minutes. I think I've already passed it, right? Yes, I have. So it's this survivorship bias. Okay, the reason that there's a Facebook and there's a Google is because there were 100 other companies that failed, right? And they were all in San Francisco. So the reason they're there is because there were so many of them to begin with, right? Keep that in mind, okay? So Lithuania can be just like Silicon Valley or totally different, right? It doesn't matter. Don't disrupt things, interrupt things. If it isn't broke, don't fix it, okay? If it is broken, then do fix it. Don't find efficiencies. Don't focus on saving people time and saving people money. When was the last time you sat down at Google and you said, I want to save time, right? I need to find a product that helps me save time, right? No one has ever done that, right? So don't create a product that saves people time. Create a product that solves a problem for them, that solves an urgent need that they have, right? Don't seek opportunities. Don't look at market sizes as justification for getting into something, right? Focus on what passion you really have, right? Work with what you have, right? Don't dream about what you don't have. Don't tell investors, well, you know, we're not in Silicon Valley, so we don't know about this. Or Europeans especially love to get down on themselves, especially Czechs. I don't know how it is in Lithuania. And they'll explain to you, well, we don't understand marketing because we're not from California, right? This is BS, right? What I love about Europe is that every country, every small country has its own film industry, its own literary history, right? Its own culture, which is unique and defensible, right? No one can copy that from you. And believe me, if you're from California, right, we don't have our own anything, right? Everything is borrowed. Everything is taken in from everywhere else. So that doesn't give us a big advantage, right? You have something that no one can replicate. We replicate everything, right? So work with what you have. Finally, does this stop working? Or am I finished? I'm finished, yeah? So given that, I want to open up for a few minutes for questions, either about what we do at Startup Yard or anything that I've talked about. Or if you want to hear about why I hate San Francisco some more, then please ask some questions about that. Okay, so questions? Come on, wake up. It's 10:30. You all had coffee, right? No?
There is one question.
There's a question. Oh yeah. It's like, I'm like Jerry Springer. Go.
Hi. Brilliant speech, thanks. Are you investing just in fintech, or also in social capital, which is part of the biggest value of blockchain business?
So we will invest, our thesis is to invest in anything which is needed, really anything that is defensible, sustainable, and will be needed in the future, right? So we invest in blockchain companies. We invest in a company that's in our current round that's doing e-signatures using Ethereum, for example. So for us, it's not about, for example, I very much doubt we would invest in a cryptocurrency, right? Because this is just trying to compete with, a growing market of cryptocurrencies, unless it had something about it which was addressing a really urgent need in the market today, right? One of my big problems with blockchain so far, and we're investing in blockchain companies, yet most of the value that they talk about is unrealized. It's things that are not possible yet, right? We want to focus on companies that know how to create value today, right? And if they have the resources to do it, they can. So it's not just about, figuring out how to drive mass adoption of a new alternative, right? But actually focusing on a problem that the market recognizes now, right? Yeah.
Hello? And also some advice. You know a lot of investment ecosystem. Where to go with wellness startups?
Wellness?
Yes.
What kind of business do you do?
Sensory deprivation rooms.
Okay, so I have no idea. Sensory deprivation. It seems like who needs it most, right? That would be the question I would ask.
Anybody from you have in California 37% of mental health problems.
Sure.
All of them.
There you go. So this is the kind of thinking I like, right? So a lot of people, a lot of startups from this region would say, well, we're going to go to the US because it's a big market, right? And I always say it's a big market on which you have no advantages. But if you're talking about, you know, yeah, we're number 37 in mental health, which means it's not 37%, but we have a lot of crazy people. So if we have a lot of crazy people and no one's helping them, then yeah, that is a big opportunity for you. It's an actual need that you can address. Go ahead.
In Lithuania, it's #1 in suicidal rating in Europe. Addictions, bullying, it's practically #1, from #1 to #3. But we're looking about investments. We need some investment to develop what we have already into the scalable product.
So to me, that means you should stay here and you should focus on investors who understand that problem as well, right? Lithuanian investors. I mean, you know, a lot of times, are we in the flight path? Okay. A lot of times startups like yourself, they come to us saying, you know, we're trying to solve this really urgent problem in our own market. And we ask them first, what about the investors in your market? Do they understand that problem? Right? And if they don't, it's your job to kind of show them, right? It's very hard for us to do it because we're not there, right?
Yeah, and I'm being disruptive right now because it's time.
You're interrupting.
Okay. Actually, a short question. You said you're a third most famous American in Prague. Who's the other two bastards?
I don't know.
Okay, good. Thank you.